Consultant for 7 years now, so I'm a kind of dinosaur for Odoo. So today I will talk about the load testing, how to stress your Odoo instance with a special tool. Here we use Locust. Okay. So during this presentation we will introduce what's really the load testing, the context of create a new instance, an Odoo instance. Then we will use Locust, explain what it is really. I will make a small demonstration and I will finish with a conclusion. So the first thing is we have a recurring question. It is I know if my configuration and my size of my server is correct or not. Okay. So here the goal of this talk is to answer this question if you correctly set up everything in Odoo. So first, my context, I create a new instance. So you have a customer, perhaps you want to create a new instance. The first thing you want to do is to know which kind of hosting you will have. So the first thing you can, if you want, choose our SaaS platform or the Odoo SH platform, but you can also have your own instance in your own server. Okay, but the problem is when you do that, you have to understand all the options and how to create your own instance. So the first thing, you will certainly check the documentation about how to set up and deploy an Odoo. So to do that, you have a documentation to deploy Odoo. So it's just here, the link is in the documentation about the deployment. So here, for example, you see that you can configure a number of workers. And here we give you a theoretic value that you can have for one worker 6 concurrent users. Okay, so that's really something really theoretic. And here the goal of all this talk is to check if this is okay or not. Okay. Then we also give you a small theoretic about the memory. Okay. So all these options, it's to configure directly on your Odoo instance. So here, for example, you can configure the number of workers depending of the rules we give just before in the documentation. Then you can also limit the memory soft and hard. So I don't know if you know the difference. So the soft is when you reach an amount of memory here, after your action, the worker will dead. And then the hard is you don't wait that you finished your request, you directly die the worker. Okay. You have some other information about the time CPU and the time real. And you can also have a lot of different options. So normally you can go to the documentation about Odoo to check how to configure your server. But here, as you can see, here we have theoretic value to put for these options, but it's not really, it's really complex to know how to really configure and how to optimize my memory in Odoo. How many workers can I really set? Because we say 6 users, but it's really depending of the charge of every user. Some user have a heavier charge than the other. It's really depending of which kind of user you have. A portal is not the same that, for example, an account that generate a general ledger. Sorry. So when you finish all the options of Odoo, you also have to specify all the options for the PostgreSQL. So here I just give you a clue. It's a PG tune, so it's just a script which optimize for you some PostgreSQL options. Okay, out of the box. And then you will configure your Nginx. But the problem is, as I say, for the moment it's really theoretic value. The first thing you will do is certainly take the theoretic and check if it works or not. So the second thing certainly you have to do I think it's not a nice to have, it's really something you have to deploy also. It's a monitoring system. So for example, we use Munin, okay, we have other, if you want you can use other, but the goal here is really to monitor what happened on your server. Because all the options here, depending of the charge you want to, the load you want to see on your server. So the goal is to see if Odoo is slow or not, and if it's slow, it's correctly that Odoo take all the load of your server, or if you can give more to Odoo. Okay. So here it's really important, but here, in fact, when you monitor, it's too late. The problem here is you can see the problem, but the user already used the system. Okay. So here we have to find a way to simulate the user request before the real user will use Odoo. Okay. And here it's the reason why we use Locust. So Locust is an open source tool which allow you to make some requests directly in XMLRPC to your Odoo server. Okay. So here I give you just the interface of Locust. Okay. So here you have an example, but it is HTTP request, so it's the reason why you have get and post. But here you see that you can have the name of the request, the number of fields, and you have a lot of different measures that you can use to understand if your system will be slow or not, and depending here of the number of users. For example, here you can ask to Locust to have 10, 100, or you can choose the number of users you want to simulate. Okay, so you can go to the Locust website. Whoops, it's this one, and to download it, it's really easy. So I will show you how to create some tests with Locust. Okay. Whoops. So the first thing we install, as I say, Locust. So it's really installed. It's just a pip install Locust. Then you have to create your XMLRPC tests. Okay. So here it's really easy. In fact, we just call some methods in Odoo. Okay. For example, here I read a partner, I read a project, and I create an SO. Okay. It's typically, for example, the use of one of your users. Okay. So to define here which call you have to do, you can also go to the debug mode and to ask to have a log level Debug RPC answer, so you can see every request that the server will do when a normal user will use. So you simulate directly, so I will show after perhaps this test. But here the goal is just to recreate something that a normal user will do. Okay. So here, I guess you can see you have a decorator, the task. In fact, the task is just a ratio. So in this example, for example, the task 2 will be executed twice much as the task 1. Okay, so that's just a decorator. Oh, sorry. Up. And then the last thing is to create a last class. So here, what we do is just we call here the file we just create, so the XMLRPC file, test file, and here we just give some options, so you can read here if you want the different options, but the most important is the host and the database, obviously. Okay, so here I test locally, and then you give the task you want to check. Okay, here, as you can see, we have Odoo Locust module. Okay, so to do that, we need a connector between Odoo and Locust. Okay, so normally, I don't know if you already see, but you have here the link of the old connector, but this connector use the old version of XMLRPC. Okay, I will show you the new one. For the moment, I don't push directly on GitHub, but I will explain you what we do. It's not really complex. Okay. So that was the last file, and then we can load Locust just with this command. Okay. So Locust -f with the file here you just create and the class you want to test. Okay. So that's all for the theory. Now I will show you what we do in the code. Okay, so here I take another example. I don't know. Perhaps it's better like that. Everybody can see it. No? Like that it's better? Okay. So here, as the previous example, it's really the same. So here I read a product and I create a product. It's just a small example. And here you create your task. Okay, so you have two different files. Here you have my stress test.py, and here you have my task.py. And here I will show you what we do, in fact, for the connector. If I just find, whoop. Yips. Okay, so here is just the connector we do. Okay, so you can take the one of my colleague already work, but here we use a new library. So it's not OpenERP library, it's Odoo lib. Okay, it's just a new library. And then what we do is just we monkey patch here the send method. And in fact what we do is just we try. So here we give the service. So here you give the name of the call you make. Here we make an exception. It's in the case of failure. If you have a failure, you put the failure directly here and you just monkey patch. Here it's not really important to understand that. It was just to show you how we do. But we can directly take this file and normally it works. So, and here we obviously define all the connection of the XMLRPC. So here it was the first thing. So here what we do here is just inheriting the file I just show you. Okay, you can inherit this one, or you can take the one of my colleague. It's just the mine is the new version. So here you can, as I show, specify the host, the database, the password, and so on, if you want. So here, so left you have my Odoo server, and right you have here my Locust. So I just start my Locust, and then, whoops. So the first thing, Locust asks me how many users I want to simulate, and this user, how you want to spawn per second this user. So for example, I put 10 users and I spawned every second. So I start, and here you can see that you have correctly my login, then a search, a read, and a create. Okay. In fact, if I go back to my code, you can see that what we do is here a search, a read, and a create. So we correctly simulate what we want, and here you can see that the metrics are moving because Locust is running for the moment. And here you see that no, you have 10 user simulate. Okay, you can stop and check with some charts, failure, and you can see a lot of different measure. Okay, that's I think the first thing. Up. So, and if I go directly in my database, if you go to the products, whoops. you will see that all the test locust is created, so we correctly simulate directly the creation of a product here. Okay, so I will also show you the last thing. So how to know which methods to call in your XMLRPC. So if you go to my help, so I will certainly do like that. So whoop. You can change the log level and put, I think it's, if I correctly, log level equal debug RPC answer. Okay, so here I just add the option log level debug RPC answerer, and in this case, in fact, when you go to a product, for example, you can see directly here, for example, I have a read, and if you simulate directly by the interface, you understand which methods you call. So for example, if a user make just a click I do, it's the same that just make a read like that. Okay, you can also use the network with the Chrome. So that's a way perhaps to understand which methods to call in the XMLRPC test. Okay. So, whoops. I will. So just to make a conclusion about that. So here the goal of load testing is really if you want to test before using in production directly with the user. So it's really if you want to load your own server. Okay. Sometimes we ask me if it's possible to do it on Odoo SH. So technically it's possible because it's just an XMLRPC call, but we discourage to do it just for the load. And moreover, if you test directly on a development branch, you don't have the same number of workers that on production, so it can be different in your case. So here I don't know if you have question about Locust or the load testing. Yeah?
You said that in average you can use one worker per 6 users. Is that for the 6 users that are an average user or a user that makes some kind of request that is scheduled?
Here it's really, as I say, it's really a theoretic value. So it's we calculate that with an average user, but it's really depending. It's also the reason why we have to use the load testing. It's to check if this theoretic value is correct or not for in your case.
Okay. And we can use this with every version of Odoo.
Yeah. So here is just XMLRPC call. So normally you can do it in all the version, even in 6 if you want. It's possible. Yeah.
So we have a client who's got about 100 users on Odoo dedicated environment.
Yeah.
And if we take that one worker for 6 users, we're talking about 16 workers. Can you have as many workers on?
In fact,
SH?
this value is really, as I said, theory.
Yeah.
So it's really depending, and on its edge, it's not really the same because the worker is in a dispatcher, not directly from the Odoo. So for Odoo SH, it's not the same. So the measure here is really if you have an Odoo out of the box in your own server, not on Odoo SH. You can, I think, normally it's 15, I think, the user per worker in the Odoo SH. So it's not the same directly. Yeah.
What would you recommend? Processor with more number of cores or processor with faster cores?
So sorry, you want?
That is, you will like to use 3 GHz processor or 2 GHz processor with more cores?
So here, in fact, the goal is not to really size the server, it's more to test the size you make on your server. But here, if you check the documentation, we make this. So normally we say that so to know the number of worker, what we do is just the number of CPU, 2 times the number of CPU plus 1, and we say that it's 6 users for 1 worker. So normally with that you can calculate how many CPU you want.
But many times we found that when we select certain CPUs, some cores get overloaded while others idle.
Sorry, I don't understand you.
Some cores are getting overloaded, whereas others are being idle in their system. So he's saying that his load is not equally distributed across the cores.
Yeah, so here the goal here of the worker is that depending on the user, you are in different CPU. So it's really, yeah, the charge can be different between one CPU and the other depending of the worker is working for the moment. So if a user just have a small call and the other make, for example, a general ledger, the call is really different and the load is really different between the CPU. Yeah.
Do you think that this solution could be useful for unit tests?
No, we have another way to make unit tests. I think we have a talk about that. I don't know if it's already...
And for this solution,
Here, you can use because you see the fail in Locust,
exactly.
but we have a library and you can use unit tests directly, so normally it's okay. So perhaps I will continue. If you have questions, you can come to me, but I think you can leave because it's time now. But you can come if you have more questions. So.